Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. A little talk about Diablo IV. As you might know by now, a lucky group of creators, press and otherwise, were allowed to see a presentation and be part of a discussion about the future of the game, what's coming and what the goals are. Obviously I'm not allowed to say anything about what was said or shown, but I am allowed to tell you that we're part of that presentation. As some of the other creators have highlighted carefully by now, a lot of the feedback about D4 and some of the major issues were being addressed in some hopeful ways. If what was discussed is actually achieved and properly followed through on, we can certainly have a lot of hope for some just new life injected into the game, which in my opinion is the thing it needs the most. Maybe the most important aspect of that talk was their awareness of the bigger issues. They do have some plans for a lot of it. The thing is, of course, that doesn't mean they're going to successfully achieve that, or all of it at least, but it did seem like they're very aware of the community and the major problems at the moment, and what they presented did look good, as we'll get back into that shortly. But what are some of the major issues that I feel exist in the game right now? At least for me, I want to look at Season 9, which I think's been a bit of a low point for the game, just in terms of player interest and the feeling, certainly compared to some of the higher highs, like even Season 8 before that. I don't know if filler season is a fair way to talk about things, but I do think it at least addresses an aspect of how I feel about some of these seasons. Seasons where you've got fundamental improvements to core systems, but at the same time, it lacks in new content and that fresh feeling. Where, say, the season before, Season 8 felt like a high for new core systems, like the layer bosses obviously, Season 9 felt overly familiar in many aspects. So, say, the powers, they were neat conceptually and mechanically, where sure, it was a bit of a complicated version of a power system, to be fair, with a lot of jargon, where it's like, oh, okay, you've got horadric spells, and then that's powered by a catalyst, which is like the power itself. Then you've got the passive enhancements to that, so there's infusions and the many different ways they work. You've got arcana and how these combine to change the skill and which skill it actually activates on. Also, they all have their own ranks and you got to upgrade those and that adds more. So it certainly was complicated, but that isn't a bad thing. The thing here for me is how it's just kind of the same temporary power system we've been seeing, especially right after the boss power system in Season 8. A bit more refined, a bit more to it, but rather familiar despite that. This was even more so the case with the very familiar concept that was occult gems, at least version 2.0, now called horadric jewels. Slot them in and get armor and resistance to all elements, and some really strong bonuses. To be fair to these, again, there's a bit more to them, some interesting effects. Like, hey, yeah, you can do loads more element damage, but you're going to take a lot more element damage at the same time. Or the fact that they'll spawn in these elites that attack you, which can be useful because, hey, you can debuff them and proc stuff, build power off them. There's a good period there for sorcerers where they wanted the final pit boss to have adds so that they could proc their freezes and such. And hey, spawning extra elites in through this horadric jewel was exactly that. So their function and design was very measured and clever, considering what players have been doing and the tricks that they're using. But we also can't deny that it was basically just occult gems, but slightly better. And I've already experienced occult gems. So those were more of the temporary stuff, but we did have some important uplifts for the old systems, like the tired nightmare dungeons that have been long since overshadowed by the pit system. But now we have the strong rooms where you might get, say, an escalation sigil just as a little bonus while you're doing a nightmare dungeon. And then escalations are that stacking difficulty of a nightmare dungeon, going into another and then another back to back and dealing with a final boss that's unique that you can only face there, with some very potent rewards at the end, which is great too. The problem there is that that was like the main aspect, the new content for the season. And what it was basically do nightmare dungeons 3 times or sometimes encounter a little mini dungeon inside of it, which by the way I've experienced before with things like root holds. But the big thing and important aspect of that is that they're not going away. Escalation strong rooms, they're sticking around. They're an important feature. And now nightmare dungeons are better long term because of it. They did some clever rebalancing for the endgame loop, where now in better you have more options or specific rewards for focused content, you know, to do the things you want to do to get the rewards that you're looking for. Instead of it being pure RNG or just one being so much better than the rest, that's basically all you do. Important changes came to, say, the rune drops in the Undercity, and specific tribute rewards being very rewarding too. There is some gripes there that do occur with, say, like the much better Nightmare dungeons giving much better rewards, which is where I would go to Infernal Hordes to get, say, loads of gem drops and materials and currency in general, kind of making that content less specifically valuable by comparison. But we do know that Infernal Hordes is also going to get an uplift soon too. With the updated layer system, we can now go after specific bosses for specific rewards. The new key system, meaning you can actually just go fight them straight away. Though there was a lot less reason to do that in this season compared to Season 8. Because in Season 8, the first time you killed a boss, you would get a power, which was awesome. Even if you didn't get any drops because you didn't have a key for that boss. This time around, you didn't really get anything. Still, the layer boss system is a lot better than it was before. But it does kind of tie into the major gripe that I have with the game right now for Endgame, which is Mythic uniques. Crafting them is a nightmare. The legendary runes are still super hard to get your hands on, even with the buffs that occurred for the Undercity. And I find Mythic uniques a bit too required for builds to do what they're supposed to. Rather than being something crazy and fun, like say doubling or tripling the distance of your teleport on Sorcerer or something, it's kind of just required DPS increases. Like most builds are going to need Air of Perdition. Or if you're a resource spam build, you're going to need the Starless Skies ring. Often, these get in the way of important slots, like your weapon aspect, or say, yeah, your ring, but most importantly with Air of Perdition and that one chest piece, it's getting in the way of your very limited defensive slots, your helmet, your chest, and your legs. And usually with some important build functional uniques, you lose all three of them. So it already feels like uniques, and it already feels like Mythic uniques get in the way of having a build function. And there's this unbelievable grind and a lot of RNG to get your Mythic uniques that you need. And it demands basically player trading with extreme costs of gold to get the runes that you need to craft the Mythic unique you want. So that's definitely one of the things that I really want to see change that did not feel better in this season despite the rune drops being better. And a problem that I've felt more and more as the seasons have continued and Season 9 didn't really feel too changed is the fact that the same builds or very similar builds are often your top option each season. Usually you have a couple classes with a new build and then a few that are doing almost the same thing as last season. Spiritborn blasted to the top of the leaderboards and functions and power level, and they're back doing the same thing. Quill volley spam. Just like their first top season, which was quill volley spam. I say this as someone who generally mains a Necromancer, and I saw Bone Spirit be the top build for multiple seasons in a row. That was right after Bone Spear was the top build multiple seasons in a row. In Season 7, Season 8, Bloodwave was the top or the top build. I want each and every class to have something fresh and interesting each season that is definitely one of the or clearly a top choice. So you don't have to play the same build if you want to do the hardest content properly. A lot of that hardest content and endgame revolves around pit pushing, which at a certain point becomes just purely for the fun of it and is really the only long-term endgame system that exists, the only real long challenge that the game has. That has not changed in quite a few seasons. So when we think more about the general state of Diablo 4 as I've been getting into there, it's the big systems that have just got better and better. You've got more options than ever to get you one. It's easier than ever to get the uniques you need to get a build functional. Admittedly, the seasonal temporary powers and such are better than ever, but it does feel a bit too much similar to the last season, the last loop around. Unless there happened to be a major change that season. That seems to be something we actually get every 2, maybe 3 seasons, like the recent Season 8 layer boss update, which was great. It feels like if you're someone who hasn't played Diablo 4 in a few seasons, you're going to find things massively improved at a core way or at a seasonal way for the temporary stuff. But if you're someone that plays ARPGs regularly and tries to jump in each season to sink your teeth in for something fresh and fun, it doesn't always feel like it hits, it's always there each and every season. And having played every season, pre-season and beta for Diablo 4 since its launch and pre-launch, I'm starting to feel like the game needs core, fundamental changes to the very way the game works, the loop and progression that we have, how classes function, how to build power, how you're actually rewarded, to minimize us doing the same thing every season over and over, which has only been improved time and time again. But right now, it does kind of feel like the best way to enjoy Diablo 4 is to not play it every season. So, big changes feel needed now. Now, as I said at the start, we have been shown a presentation talking about the future based on feedback and what they're hoping to do to achieve that, and it was a really positive thing. Like I said, we're far from the first creators to discuss that presentation, or the vague concepts were at least safe to acknowledge. I've seen across comments, socials, general reactions to this news as creators talked about this presentation, that people were far from instantly sold by these new promises and info. After all it is right now is vague, good promises. Of course, things you want to hear, but will it actually pan out that way and on a satisfying timeline? Diablo IV so far has had some serious ups and downs through its lifespan, and right now this is coming off the back of what I consider a bit of a weaker season in terms of interest. It is completely fair then at this point to question what they've said, even if it sounds good, because they've got to actually achieve it. The only thing I can safely highlight with that in mind for the future of the game would be that upcoming skill tree rework, where the lead live game designer Colin Finer talked about it with IGN in an interview around the time of Season 8's launch, where they're talking about how they want the skill tree to actually feel a lot more meaningful. They're going to rework the legendary aspect skill expression that happens, where you've got an aspect that changes the way a skill functions, and of course changes the way you play because of it, taking those special effects and putting it in the skill tree instead. So your unique functions comes from levels and playing that class, rather than an RNG drop that also has scaling power on it. This is really important for many builds, obviously, but certain classes like Druid, who still to this day require X or Y unique before they even feel like a Druid benefiting from transformations properly, can then get it guaranteed by choice in the skill tree, which is going to be a lot better. Whereas aspects are going to remain the power side of things, like how strong things are, with the scaling RNG behind that, not the function of it, which is obviously a good thing. It does feel like it's something we've been calling for the entire duration of the game though, and we're 2.5 years into the life cycle. There was that roadmap they showed us for 2025. We've now had the Sins of Horadrim right in the middle there. And we know Infernal Chaos is coming next. It looks like we're going to get a new temporary power with Chaos powers. And yeah, there's that Infernal Hordes update that I mentioned. But it's not going to be until 2026 that we get this new expansion, the ranking system they reference, and leaderboards. So it still feels like there's a bit of a way, huh? I do think what was shown and discussed in that presentation looked really good. That feels like it will address a lot of the problems I'm having, and I hope that gives you at least some hope and excitement. But I know the vocal majority are still going to remain very cynical after these last 2.5 years of a lot of ups and downs, and again, that's fair enough. So let me know what you're thinking, and if you do have hope for the future of this game. At this moment, I feel the thing they really need to do is show us, rather than tell us, and all we can do before that is wait. So either way, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.